My name is Ellen Martinez, and for 62 years, I believed I understood what family meant. I was wrong about everything, especially about my daughter Megan. This is the story of how she tried to destroy me, and how I fought back in ways she never saw coming. I raised Megan as a single mother after her father Carl abandoned us when she was 3. He left behind nothing but debt and empty promises, so I worked double shifts at the textile factory to give her everything I never had. Dance lessons, piano recitals, the best clothes I could afford. I sacrificed everything for my daughter's happiness. Megan grew up beautiful and charming, the kind of girl who could light up any room. She married Randy Peterson 5 years ago, a successful marketing executive who seemed to adore her. They lived in an upscale suburb about an hour from my modest apartment, and I was proud of the life she'd built. Or so I thought. The trouble started 6 months ago when Megan announced she wanted to renew her wedding vows for their 5th anniversary. Not a simple ceremony, a full-scale luxury wedding with 300 guests at the Grand Belmore Hotel, complete with a 7-course dinner and live orchestra. "Mom, this is so important to us," she said during Sunday dinner at my place, her manicured fingers gesturing dramatically. "We want to do everything right this time, have the wedding of our dreams." "That sounds lovely, honey," I replied, refilling her wine glass. "I'm sure it will be beautiful." "The thing is," she continued, not meeting my eyes, "we've already put down deposits. The venue, the caterer, the florist. It's going to cost about $80,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. 80,000. Megan, that's more than I make in 2 years. I know it sounds like a lot, but Mom, you've always said family comes first. And since Dad isn't around to help. She let the words hang in the air like a guilt-laden cloud. I felt that familiar stab of responsibility, the same feeling that had driven me to work overtime for 20 years. "Sweetheart, I want to help, but I don't have that kind of money. My retirement savings are modest at best." Her expression hardened slightly before she forced a smile. "What about the house?" "What house?" "Your apartment building. You could get a loan against your equity, or maybe sell it. Property values have gone up so much." I stared at my daughter, wondering when she'd become so calculating. The small apartment building I owned was my only real asset, inherited from my mother. It provided supplemental income that allowed me to live comfortably in retirement. "Megan, that building is my security. If I sell it or mortgage it heavily, what happens if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong," she insisted. "Randy's business is thriving. We'll pay you back within 2 years, I promise. With interest." The conversation continued for another hour, with Megan alternating between emotional manipulation and logical arguments. She reminded me of every sacrifice I'd made for her, every time I'd chosen her needs over my own wants. By the time she left, I felt worn down and confused. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Megan called daily, sometimes crying about how disappointed Randy's family would be if they had to cancel. She sent me photos of venues and dresses, painting elaborate pictures of the perfect day that could only happen with my financial support. "All my friends' parents helped with their weddings," she said during one particularly difficult conversation. "Veronica's mom spent $60,000 on her daughter's reception. Bertha's parents took out a second mortgage. It's what parents do." I began to feel selfish for hesitating. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was what good mothers did, even when it meant risking their financial security. The breaking point came when she brought Randy to visit. He was charming as always, but I noticed something different in his demeanor, a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Ellen," he said, using my first name though I'd asked him to call me Mom, "I understand your concerns about the money. But think of it as an investment in our future. This wedding will establish us in the community, help with my business connections. It's really a smart financial move for everyone." His tone was condescending, as if he were explaining a simple concept to a child. I felt my hackles rise, but Megan was nodding along enthusiastically. Plus, she added, we've already sent the invitations. If we cancel now, it would be so embarrassing. People are expecting the event of the year. That night, I lay awake thinking about everything they'd said. Despite my reservations, I couldn't bear the thought of disappointing my daughter. The next morning, I called my financial advisor and began the process of securing a loan against my property. The paperwork took 3 weeks to process. During that time, Megan was the most attentive daughter I'd ever known. She called daily to check on my health, brought me flowers, even helped me reorganize my closet. I should have been suspicious of this sudden devotion, but I was touched by what seemed like genuine affection. When the loan was approved, I received a check for $90,000, slightly more than we discussed because of additional costs that had, suddenly, appeared. Megan cried with happiness when I told her, hugging me tighter than she had in years. "You're the best mother in the world," she whispered. "I'm so lucky to have you." I deposited the money into my checking account, feeling proud that I could give my daughter this gift despite my financial concerns. The wedding was scheduled for 3 months away, just enough time for all the elaborate preparations Megan had planned. Then everything changed. 2 weeks after receiving the money, I got a call from Howard Patterson, the property management company that handled my apartment building. "Ellen, I'm calling about the Peterson account," he said, his voice unusually formal. "There seems to be some confusion about the ownership status of the building." "What kind of confusion?" "Well, we received paperwork indicating that you've transferred ownership to your daughter, Megan Peterson. The documents appear to be legitimate, notarized and everything. But I wanted to confirm with you directly." My blood turned to ice. "I never transferred ownership of anything to Megan." "Are you certain?" "The documents are quite detailed, including your signature on the deed transfer." I hung up and immediately drove to Howard's office. The documents he showed me were shocking: a complete transfer of my property to Megan, dated just 3 days after I'd given her the wedding money. My signature looked perfect, but I had no memory of signing anything like this. "This is impossible," I said, studying the papers with shaking hands. "I never agreed to this." Howard looked uncomfortable. "Ellen, I have to ask, have you been experiencing any memory issues lately? Sometimes elderly people forget important transactions." "I'm 62, not 92, I snapped. "And my memory is fine. This signature may look like mine, but I never signed these papers." That evening, I confronted Megan by phone. She was at work, so I had to call her office. "Mom, I can't talk right now," she said, her voice distracted. "I'm in the middle of a client meeting. This can't wait." Howard Patterson called about the building. "He says you own it now." There was a long pause. "Oh, that. Yeah, I was going to mention it. Randy thought it would be better for tax purposes if the property was in my name. You signed the papers when you were here last week, remember? You were tired, maybe that's why you don't recall." "I never signed any papers, Megan. I would remember something like that." Her voice turned cold. "Mom, you've been forgetting a lot of things lately. Maybe you should see a doctor. In the meantime, don't worry about the building. I'm taking care of everything now." She hung up before I could respond. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone, trying to make sense of what was happening. How had my daughter gained ownership of my property? And why was she treating me like a confused old woman? I spent the weekend researching property laws and fraud prevention. What I discovered made me sick to my stomach. If someone had access to your personal information and knew your signature well enough, it was possible to forge property transfers. The notarization could be faked, especially if the perpetrator had connections in professional services. Monday morning, I visited my lawyer, Bobby Chin, whom I'd known for 15 years. He reviewed the documents with increasing concern. Ellen, this definitely looks like fraud, he said, adjusting his glasses. The signature analysis we can do will likely prove these documents are forged. But I have to ask, did Megan have access to your personal information? Social security number, identification documents. I nodded miserably. She helped me organize my paperwork a few months ago. She said she wanted to make sure everything was in order in case of an emergency. And she would know your signature well. She's been signing birthday cards and school forms in my handwriting since high school. She always said she inherited my penmanship. Bobby leaned back in his chair. We need to act quickly. First, we'll file a police report for property fraud. Then we'll get a forensic handwriting expert to analyze these documents. In the meantime, you should limit any contact with Megan until we understand the full scope of what's happening. The police report was filed that afternoon. Detective Veronica Santos, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, took my statement with professional skepticism that gradually shifted to concern as I provided documentation of the timeline. Mrs. Martinez, this appears to be a well-planned scheme, she said, reviewing my financial records. The timing of the loan, the property transfer, even your daughter's sudden attentiveness beforehand, it all suggests premeditation. But why would she do this to me? I gave her everything she wanted. Money makes people do terrible things, sometimes even to family. We'll investigate thoroughly, but I should warn you, these cases can be difficult to prosecute, especially when family members are involved. That week was the longest of my life. I barely slept, couldn't eat, and jumped every time the phone rang. I kept hoping Megan would call with an explanation, some misunderstanding that could make everything right again. Instead, I received a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. The letterhead was impressive: Morrison, Clark and Associates, specializing in elder law. The content made my knees weak. The letter informed me that my daughter was seeking a legal guardianship over my affairs due to concerns about my mental competency. It cited evidence of confusion about financial matters, memory loss, and inability to manage my property responsibly. I called Bobby immediately. They're trying to have me declared incompetent, I said, my voice shaking. How can they do this? It's a common tactic in elder abuse cases, he explained grimly. If they can convince a judge that you're not mentally capable, they can justify taking control of your assets. The good news is that we have medical records showing your excellent health, and the timeline makes their motives obvious. What do I do? We fight back. Hard. The next few weeks became a blur of medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and legal preparations. I had to prove my mental competency while simultaneously fighting the property fraud charges. The stress was overwhelming, made worse by the fact that Megan had stopped all communication with me. I felt completely alone until I received an unexpected phone call from Carl, my ex-husband. I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. Ellen, I heard about what's happening with Megan, he said, his voice heavy with regret. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I want to help. How did you even find out? Randy contacted me. He wanted me to testify that you've been acting strangely, showing signs of dementia. He offered me money to support their guardianship petition. My heart sank even further. And are you going to do it? Hell no. What kind of man do you think I am? I may have been a terrible husband and father, but I'm not going to help anyone abuse you financially. In fact, I have some information that might help your case. Carl met me at Bobby's office the next day. He looked older than I remembered, gray-haired and tired, but his eyes held the same intelligence that had attracted me 30 years ago. Randy came to see me 3 months ago, he began, pulling out a small recording device. I recorded the conversation because something felt off about the whole situation. He basically laid out their entire plan, getting you to mortgage your building for the wedding, then transferring ownership while you were emotionally vulnerable. He even bragged about how easy it would be to manipulate you. Bobby's eyes lit up as we listened to the recording. Randy's voice was clear and unmistakably arrogant as he described their scheme. "The old lady has always been a sucker for Megan's tears," Randy said on the recording. "We just need to keep the pressure up until she signs over the property. Once we have that, we can sell it and pay for the wedding plus have enough left over for a down payment on a bigger house." "What if she gets suspicious?" Carl's voice asked. "We'll play the dementia card. Everyone expects old people to lose their minds eventually. A few forged documents, some testimony about her confusion, and we'll have guardianship within months." The recording was devastating evidence of premeditation. Bobby immediately filed it with the court and the police. Detective Santos called me that afternoon with an update. "Mrs. Martinez, this recording changes everything. We now have clear evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. I'm issuing arrest warrants for both Megan and Randy Peterson." I should have felt vindicated, but instead I felt hollow. My daughter, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, had planned to destroy me financially and then lock me away like a dangerous animal. The arrests happened 2 days before the scheduled wedding. I heard about it from Bobby, who called with barely concealed satisfaction in his voice. They picked up Randy at his office and Megan at the wedding venue, actually. Apparently, she was doing a final walkthrough when the police arrived. The venue coordinator called me because they wanted to know if you were still liable for the deposits. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to sue Megan and Randy for the money." "You never authorized any of those expenses." The local newspaper covered the story with relish. "Society wedding cancelled after fraud arrests" was the headline, accompanied by photos of both Megan and Randy in handcuffs. The article detailed the scheme and mentioned that 300 disappointed guests had received last-minute cancellation notices. I felt no satisfaction in their humiliation, only a deep sadness for what we'd all lost. The legal proceedings moved faster than anyone expected. With the recorded evidence and forensic proof that the property documents were forged, both Megan and Randy agreed to plea bargains rather than face trial. Randy received 3 years in prison for fraud and conspiracy. Megan got 18 months plus 5 years of probation, a lighter sentence because the prosecutor acknowledged that Randy had been the primary architect of the scheme. Before sentencing, Megan was allowed to make a statement to the court. I attended the hearing, sitting in the back row where she couldn't see me easily. "Your Honor," she said, her voice small and defeated, "I know what I did was wrong. I let greed and desperation cloud my judgment. I betrayed the person who loved me most in this world, and I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life." She turned slightly, and our eyes met across the courtroom. "Mom, I know you're here. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. You deserved better than what I became." For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who brought me dandelions from the yard like precious gifts. But that child was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. I left the courthouse without speaking to her. The property was returned to me, along with most of the money I'd loaned for the wedding. The venue and vendors were surprisingly understanding, especially after the media coverage made their situation clear. Some even waived their cancellation fees entirely. But the real surprise came 6 months later, when I received a visitor I never expected. Carl knocked on my door on a rainy Thursday evening, holding a bottle of wine and wearing an expression of nervous determination. "I know I don't have any right to ask," he said, "but could we talk? Really talk, for the first time in 30 years. I let him in, curious despite myself. We sat in my living room, the same one where he'd announced he was leaving all those years ago. "I've been sober for 8 years, he began without preamble. Part of recovery is making amends to people you've hurt. I've owed you an apology for 3 decades. It's a little late for that, don't you think?" "Yes, it is. But watching what Megan did to you, it made me realize that I started this cycle. I abandoned my responsibilities, left you to raise her alone, and taught her that family doesn't really matter when things get difficult. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I know Megan learned her selfishness from me. I modeled it for her every day until I left. You were the only one who ever put family first, and look how she repaid you. I felt tears threatening for the first time since the whole ordeal began. I tried so hard to give her everything I never had. I thought if I sacrificed enough, she'd grow up different from us. You did give her everything, Carl said firmly. Love, stability, opportunities one never provided. What she became, that's not on you. Some people just choose the wrong path despite good parenting. We talked until nearly midnight, sharing memories of Megan as a child, wondering where we'd gone wrong, and slowly beginning to forgive ourselves for our failures as parents. Over the following months, Carl became a regular visitor. Not romantic, too much water had flowed under that bridge, but a friend who understood the unique pain of being betrayed by the child you tried so hard to protect. He helped me renovate the apartment building, which had suffered from neglect during the legal proceedings. We painted walls, replaced fixtures, and slowly restored my confidence in my ability to manage my own affairs. You know, he said one afternoon as we finished painting a kitchen, you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I used to think you were just stubborn, but watching you fight back against Megan and Randy, that took real courage. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified and alone. That's what courage is, doing what's necessary even when you're scared. The building renovations led to a waiting list of prospective tenants, and my rental income increased significantly. For the first time in my adult life, I felt financially secure without having to sacrifice for someone else's dreams. I also started volunteering at a local senior center, sharing my experience with other elderly people who'd faced financial abuse from family members. It was heartbreaking how common these stories were, but also empowering to help others recognize the warning signs I'd missed. 1 year after Megan's conviction, I received a letter from the women's correctional facility where she was serving her sentence. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. Mom, it began in Megan's familiar handwriting. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand why. I've had a lot of time to think about what I did, and I've been working with a counselor to understand how I became someone capable of such betrayal. I won't make excuses or try to justify my actions. I was greedy, selfish, and cruel. I saw you as an obstacle to what I wanted rather than as the person who'd given me everything. The counselor says I have narcissistic tendencies that I need to address if I ever want to have healthy relationships again. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away. You were the best mother anyone could ask for, and I repaid your love with betrayal. That's on me, not you. I hope you're doing well and that you found some peace after everything I put you through. You deserve happiness, and I hope you find it without me in your life. I love you, even though I never showed it when it mattered. Megan. I read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and putting it in my jewelry box next to my mother's wedding ring. I wasn't ready to forgive, and might never be, but something in her words suggested she was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she'd done. 2 years later, Megan was released from prison. I heard about it from Detective Santos, who'd kept in touch to ensure I felt safe. She's required to stay at least 100 miles away from you as part of her probation, the detective assured me. If she violates that in any way, she goes back to prison immediately. I nodded, appreciating the protection but wondering if it was necessary. The daughter who'd tried to destroy me felt like a stranger now, someone I'd known in another life. 3 months after her release, I received another letter. This one was postmarked from a small town in Oregon where Megan had apparently relocated. Mom, it read, I'm working as a waitress at a diner and living in a small apartment near the coast. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work, and I'm learning to live within my means for the first time in my adult life. Randy and I are divorced. He contacted me once after his release, wanting to discuss future opportunities. I hung up on him. I finally understand that he was never a partner but a predator who saw my weaknesses and exploited them. I'm not making that mistake again. I'm in therapy and attending support groups for people who've committed financial crimes against family members. You'd be surprised how many of us there are. We're all trying to understand how we became people capable of such betrayal. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I think about it every day. Not with self-pity, but with genuine remorse for the pain I caused. You raised me better than that, and I failed to live up to your example. I hope you're well and happy. You deserve all the joy in the world. Love, Megan. This time, I wrote back. Just a brief note saying I was glad she was trying to rebuild her life in a healthier way. I didn't offer forgiveness or suggest reconciliation, but I acknowledged her efforts to become a better person. We exchanged occasional letters over the next year. Hers were filled with details of her modest life, the regular customers at the diner who'd become friends, the community college classes she was taking to become a paralegal, the small apartment overlooking the ocean where she'd learned to find contentment in simple things. My letters were more guarded but gradually warmer. I told her about the senior center work, the building renovations, and even mentioned Carl's presence in my life as a friend and co-conspirator in various home improvement projects. On my 65th birthday, Megan's letter arrived with a small package. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a single charm, a small apple tree. I remembered how you used to talk about planting an orchard someday, her accompanying note read. I know it's not much, but I wanted you to have something that represented growth and new beginnings. Happy birthday, Mom. I love you. I wore the bracelet to my birthday dinner with Carl and some friends from the senior center. When someone asked about it, I found myself saying, "It's from my daughter," without the bitterness I'd expected to feel. That night, I called Megan for the first time since before her arrest. The conversation was awkward at first, both of us unsure of the boundaries in our new relationship. "Mom," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "Is it really you?" "It's me. Thank you for the bracelet. It's beautiful. I wasn't sure if you'd like it. I wasn't sure if you'd even keep it." "I'm wearing it right now," I told her, and we both cried quietly over the phone line stretching between us. We talked for an hour about safe topics, her job, my volunteer work, the weather. Neither of us mentioned the past or made promises about the future. But it was a start. Over the following months, our phone calls became more regular and more natural. Megan told me about her therapy sessions and the difficult work of understanding why she'd made such destructive choices. I shared stories about the people I'd met through my volunteer work and how their experiences had helped me process my own trauma. I met a woman whose son stole her identity to buy a boat, I told her during one call. She said the hardest part wasn't losing the money, it was losing faith in her ability to judge people's character. How is she doing now? Better. She pressed charges, got her money back, and cut off contact with him. But she said it took 2 years before she stopped second-guessing every interaction with friends and family. There was a long pause. "Is that how you feel about me? Like you can't trust your judgment anymore?" I considered the question carefully. For a while, yes. I kept wondering what signs I'd missed, what red flags I'd ignored. But therapy helped me understand that you were skilled at manipulation, and people who love deeply are often vulnerable to that kind of exploitation. I hate that I did that to you. I know you do. And that matters more than you might think. As we approached the 3rd anniversary of her arrest, Megan asked if she could visit. Her probation restrictions had been lifted, and she wanted to see me in person. I was terrified and excited in equal measure. Carl offered to be present for the visit, but I declined. This was something I needed to do alone. She arrived on a Saturday morning in May, driving a modest older car that showed careful maintenance. She looked different, thinner, with shorter hair and less makeup, wearing simple clothes that spoke of practicality over fashion. We hugged awkwardly on my doorstep, and I was surprised by how small she felt in my arms, like the child she'd once been rather than the calculating woman who tried to destroy me. "Your building looks wonderful," she said, admiring the fresh paint and new landscaping Carl and I had installed. "Thank you. Would you like some coffee?" We sat in my kitchen, the same table where she'd first proposed the wedding scheme that had started our nightmare. But the dynamic was completely different now. She seemed genuinely interested in my life and accomplishments, asking detailed questions about my volunteer work and the building renovations. "I've been following the senior advocacy legislation you mentioned," she said. "The bill that would require additional oversight for elderly financial transactions. That's partly because of cases like mine, isn't it?" I nodded. Stories like ours are unfortunately common. The legislation would require banks to flag unusual transactions involving senior accounts and provide cooling-off periods for major financial decisions. Good. I hope it passes. If it prevents even one family from going through what we did, it's worth it. After lunch, she asked if she could see the apartment I'd mentioned in my letters, the one Carl and I had renovated most recently. As we toured the bright, updated space, she said quietly, "I used to picture myself living in places like this when I was married to Randy. Big, expensive apartments with luxury finishes and designer furniture. But you know what I've learned?" "What?" "This is actually beautiful. It's well made and thoughtfully designed, but it's also practical and honest. I think I was so focused on impressing other people that I forgot to appreciate things that are genuinely good." We spent the afternoon talking about her life in Oregon. She described the satisfaction of earning her own way, the friends she'd made through work and school, the therapist who'd helped her understand the difference between wants and needs. "I'm not making a lot of money," she admitted, "but it's enough for a simple life. I have a small savings account now, the first time I've ever saved money instead of spending it before I earned it. It feels good to know I can handle a car repair or a medical bill without panicking." As evening approached, she prepared to leave for the hotel where she was staying. I walked her to her car, noting again how different she seemed from the demanding, entitled woman I'd last seen in the courtroom. "Mom," she said, turning to face me before getting in the driver's seat, "I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you. I'm not asking for money or trying to manipulate you into letting me back into your life fully. I just wanted you to see that I'm trying to become someone worthy of being your daughter again." "You are my daughter," I said, the words surprising me with their certainty. "You always have been, even when I couldn't stand the person you'd become." She cried then, openly and honestly, and I found myself crying too. Not from sadness, but from relief that we'd both survived the worst period of our lives and found our way to something that might eventually be called forgiveness. "I love you, Mom. I never stopped, even when I was hurting you. I just forgot how to show it. I love you too, Megan. We have a long way to go, but I'm willing to try if you are." She hugged me then, a real embrace full of hope and possibility. When she drove away, I didn't feel the hollow ache I'd expected. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, optimism about the future. 6 months later, Megan graduated from her paralegal program with honors. She called me from the ceremony, her voice bright with legitimate pride in her achievement. "I did it, Mom. I actually finished something I started, and I did it well. I'm so proud of you," I told her, and meant every word. "There's a law firm here that specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases. They've offered me a position. I'd be helping people like you, people who've been victimized by family members or caregivers." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. My daughter, who'd once tried to financially exploit me, was now dedicating her career to protecting elderly people from similar abuse. "That sounds perfect for you," I said. "You understand the mindset of perpetrators in a way that could really help victims." "I hope so." I want to use what I learned from being terrible to help prevent other people from being terrible. Today, as I write this story, it's been 4 years since Megan's arrest and 18 months since her visit. We talk regularly and see each other every few months. Our relationship isn't what it was before the betrayal, that innocence is gone forever, but it's something new and perhaps more honest. She's been working at the elder law firm for 8 months and has already helped secure convictions in 3 financial abuse cases. She sends me updates about her cases, always carefully anonymized, and I can hear the passion in her voice when she describes fighting for elderly clients who've been victimized by people they trusted. Carl and I have become true friends, bonded by our shared experience of parental failure and redemption. He's dating someone now, a widow from his AA group, and I'm happy for him. We still work together on building maintenance, and he's taught me more about home repair than I learned in 30 years of homeownership. My volunteer work at the senior center has expanded into a formal advocacy role. I testify at legislative hearings, speak at conferences, and work with law enforcement to help them understand the psychology of family financial abuse. It's meaningful work that's given me purpose beyond my own recovery. The building continues to thrive, with a waiting list of prospective tenants who appreciate quality maintenance and fair rent. I've been able to save significantly for the first time in my life, building a financial cushion that provides security without the need to sacrifice for others. Sometimes people ask if I've forgiven Megan completely. The answer is complicated. I've forgiven the specific actions, the fraud, the manipulation, the cruelty. But I can't forget the person she was during that period, and I remain vigilant for signs that she might revert to those patterns. Trust, once broken so completely, doesn't heal quickly or cleanly. It's more like a bone that's been shattered and reset. It may be functional again, but it's never quite the same, and it aches when the weather changes. But I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting or blind trust. It requires accepting that people can change while remaining realistic about their capacity for backsliding. It means loving someone while protecting yourself from their potential to cause harm. Megan has earned my cautious respect through consistent actions over time. She's proven that she can live honestly, work hard, and contribute positively to society. But I keep my financial information private and maintain healthy boundaries about what I'm willing to risk for our relationship. The most important thing I've learned is that my worth as a person isn't measured by my willingness to sacrifice everything for people who claim to love me. Love that demands financial ruin or emotional destruction isn't love at all, it's exploitation dressed up in family obligations. I raised Megan to believe she deserved everything she wanted, when I should have taught her to appreciate what she earned. I enabled her selfishness by always putting her needs before my own well-being, teaching her that other people existed primarily to serve her desires. Those were my mistakes as a parent, and I own them. But her choice to commit fraud and try to destroy me financially, that was her mistake, and I'm glad she owns it too. Today, I'm 66 years old with arthritic hands that still remember how to bake bread and a heart that's learned the difference between love and enablement. I have a daughter who's working to deserve the title and an ex-husband who's become an unlikely friend. I have meaningful work that helps other people avoid the pain we experienced, and financial security I built through my own efforts. Some might say I should have been more forgiving, that family deserves endless chances regardless of their behavior. Others might say I was too forgiving, that Megan should have remained cut off permanently after such a betrayal. I think the truth is more complex than either extreme. People can change, but they have to prove it through actions, not just words. Forgiveness can coexist with boundaries. Love doesn't require self-destruction. My story isn't about perfect victims or irredeemable villains. It's about the messy reality of family relationships, the complicated process of healing from betrayal, and the possibility of redemption when people are willing to do the hard work of changing themselves. Last month, Megan called with news that surprised me more than anything she'd done since her arrest. "Mom, I wanted to tell you before you heard it from someone else. Randy contacted me." My blood pressure spiked immediately. What did he want? He's getting out of prison next month, and he somehow got my number in Oregon. He wanted to meet, said he had a business proposition that could make us both rich. Please tell me you hung up on him. I did, but not before I recorded the conversation. He was trying to recruit me for some kind of investment scam targeting elderly people. When I refused, he got angry and said some things that made me realize he hasn't changed at all. Are you going to report it to the police? Already did. Apparently, soliciting people to commit crimes while on parole is a violation that could send him back to prison. Detective Santos says they're investigating. I felt a surge of pride that my daughter had not only rejected Randy's offer but had actively worked to protect his potential victims. It was exactly the kind of decision the old Megan never would have made. I'm proud of you for doing the right thing, I told her. It wasn't even a difficult choice, she replied. 3 years ago, I might have been tempted by the promise of easy money. Now I can see exactly what he is, a predator who targets vulnerable people. I spent too many years being that kind of person myself. Randy was arrested 2 weeks later for parole violation and attempting to organize a criminal conspiracy. He's back in prison now, and both Megan and I testified at his hearing. Seeing him again was difficult, but it reinforced how much we've both changed. The man who had once seemed charming and successful now appeared exactly what he was, a manipulative criminal who viewed other people as resources to be exploited. I wondered how I'd ever been fooled by his surface charm, but I suppose that's the nature of skilled manipulators. More importantly, sitting in that courtroom, I watched Megan testify with confidence and moral clarity about why she'd rejected his criminal proposal. The woman speaking was someone I could be genuinely proud of, not because she was perfect, but because she'd chosen to become better. After the hearing, we had dinner at a small restaurant near the courthouse. It was the first time we'd shared a meal in public since before her arrest, and I was struck by how natural it felt. You know what I was thinking about during Randy's testimony? She asked over dessert. What? That wedding I wanted so badly. Do you know what I would have gotten for $80,000? 1 day of expensive food and flowers, and a bunch of people I barely knew pretending to enjoy themselves. In exchange, I was willing to destroy your financial security and our relationship. Why do you think it seemed so important at the time? She considered this carefully, a habit she developed through years of therapy. I think I was trying to prove something to other people, that I was successful, that I deserved nice things, that my life was perfect. But I didn't actually care about the marriage or even the celebration. I just wanted to show off. And now I think the most beautiful wedding would be one where people came because they genuinely loved the couple, not because they were impressed by the expense. Where the focus was on commitment and community, not consumption and status. She paused, looking slightly embarrassed. Actually, there's something else I wanted to tell you. I've been dating someone. My heart skipped, not with excitement but with worry. Oh. His name is David. He's a teacher at the community college where I took classes. He knows about my past, everything. I told him on our 3rd date because I didn't want to build a relationship on lies. How did he react? He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked me what I'd learned from the experience and how I'd changed. We talked for hours about mistakes and redemption and second chances. He said everyone deserves the opportunity to become better than their worst moment. She smiled, and for the first time in years, it was the genuine smile I remembered from her childhood. He's kind, Mom. Really kind. And he lives simply. He drives an old car, lives in a small apartment, saves his money instead of spending it on status symbols. Being with him reminds me every day that happiness doesn't come from having expensive things. I'd like to meet him sometime, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. I'd like that too. Maybe you could come visit us in Oregon sometime. I could show you the coast, introduce you to my friends from work. The invitation hung between us, loaded with implications. She was offering me a chance to see her new life, to meet the people who knew her only as the person she'd become rather than the person she'd been. I'd like that, I said. Maybe in the spring. 6 months later, I made my first trip to Oregon. Carl offered to drive with me, but I decided to make the journey alone, a small act of independence that felt important. Megan met me at the small regional airport, and I was struck again by how different she looked. Healthy, relaxed, genuinely happy in a way that had nothing to do with external circumstances. Her apartment was tiny but charming, decorated with thrift store finds and handmade crafts. The view from her living room window showed the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon, and I could understand why she'd chosen this place to rebuild her life. David was indeed kind, a soft-spoken man in his early 40s who taught English literature and wrote poetry in his spare time. He treated Megan with gentle respect and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions rather than her potential usefulness to him. "Ellen," he said over dinner at their favorite local restaurant, "Megan has told me so much about you. I hope you don't mind me saying that I admire how you've handled everything. It would have been easy to give up on her entirely." It wasn't easy, I admitted. There were times when I thought about cutting off all contact permanently. What changed your mind? I looked at Megan, who was listening intently. She did. She proved through consistent actions over time that she was committed to becoming someone better. Words alone wouldn't have been enough. "Mom," Megan said quietly, "can I ask you something I've been wondering about?" "Of course." "Do you think you would have been a different kind of mother if Dad had stayed? If you hadn't had to do everything alone?" It was a question I'd wondered about myself many times. Probably. I might have been less focused on trying to be everything to you. Less willing to sacrifice my own needs to meet yours. Maybe you would have learned better boundaries if I'd modeled them. "I'm not asking to blame anyone," she said quickly. "I just want to understand the dynamics that shaped us both." "I think," David offered gently, "that most families have complicated dynamics. The important thing is recognizing them and choosing to do better going forward." We spent 3 days together, and by the time I left, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine hope for our future relationship. Not a return to what we'd had before, but something new built on honesty and mutual respect. On my last morning, Megan and I walked along the beach near her apartment. The early morning light made the ocean sparkle like scattered diamonds, and I felt a peace I hadn't known I was missing. "Mom," she said as we picked our way carefully across the rocky shoreline, "I want you to know that I understand if our relationship never gets back to where it was before. I know I broke something that might not be fully reparable. Megan, I need you to understand something. I don't want our relationship to go back to where it was before. That relationship was built on unhealthy patterns, my need to be needed, your expectation that I would always rescue you from the consequences of your choices." She looked surprised. "You don't want things to go back?" "No. What we're building now is better. It's based on who we actually are rather than who we think we should be. You're taking responsibility for your life, and I'm learning to have relationships that don't require me to sacrifice my well-being." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching seabirds dive for fish in the shallow water. "I still feel guilty," she said eventually. "About what?" "About all those years you worked so hard to give me things I didn't appreciate. About taking your love for granted. About becoming someone who could hurt you so badly. Guilt can be useful if it motivates you to make better choices. But don't let it become a prison. You're not the same person who committed those crimes, and I'm not the same person who enabled your selfishness for so long." As we headed back to her apartment, she stopped suddenly and turned to face me. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For believing I could change. For loving me enough to set boundaries and hold me accountable. I know it would have been easier to walk away entirely. It might have been easier, but it wouldn't have been right. Not for either of us." That afternoon, as I prepared to fly home, Megan gave me a small wrapped package. "It's not much," she said as I opened it, "but I wanted you to have something to remember this visit." Inside was a small framed photograph she'd taken during our beach walk, me standing on the rocky shore, looking out at the ocean with what appeared to be contentment on my face. "I like this picture because you look peaceful," she explained. "Like you're exactly where you're supposed to be." Looking at the photograph now, displayed on my kitchen windowsill next to the silver bracelet she'd given me for my birthday, I think she was right. For the first time in my adult life, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not perfect, not without challenges, but genuinely at peace with the choices I've made and the person I've become. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with state legislators about the elder protection bill that's been making its way through committee. Next week, I'm speaking at a conference for financial crimes investigators. Next month, Carl and I are planning to renovate another apartment in the building. And in 6 months, Megan and David are coming to visit me here. She wants to show him the town where she grew up, introduce him to Carl, and see the senior center where I do my volunteer work. "I want him to understand my whole story," she told me during our last phone call. "The good and the bad. Where I came from and how I got to where I am now." It occurs to me that this is what redemption actually looks like, not erasing the past or pretending it didn't happen, but integrating it into a fuller understanding of who we are and who we can choose to become. My daughter tried to destroy me financially and emotionally. She succeeded in causing tremendous pain and forcing me to rebuild my life from the ground up. But in doing so, she also accidentally gave me something I'd never had before, the knowledge that I could survive the worst kind of betrayal and still find reasons to hope. I learned that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, that my worth wasn't dependent on other people's approval, and that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. These are harsh lessons that I wouldn't wish on anyone. But having learned them, I wouldn't trade the knowledge for the comfortable illusions I used to carry about family loyalty and unconditional sacrifice. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But sometimes, if you're very patient and very careful, you can build something new on the foundation of what remains. That's what Megan and I are doing, building something new. Not a return to innocence, but a movement toward wisdom. Not a restoration of blind trust, but a cultivation of earned respect. It's messier than the fairy tale version of forgiveness that people often expect, but it's also more honest and ultimately more durable. The woman who raised Megan with blind devotion is gone, replaced by someone who loves more wisely. The daughter who saw me as an endless resource to be exploited is gone too, replaced by someone who values relationships over transactions. We're both different people than we were 4 years ago, scarred by our experiences but also strengthened by them. And perhaps that's the most important lesson of all, that it's possible to survive the worst betrayal imaginable and still find your way back to something resembling love. Not the desperate, consuming love that destroys boundaries and enables destruction, but the steady, respectful love that sees people clearly and chooses to support their growth rather than their weaknesses. This is my story. It's not a perfect story, and it doesn't have a completely happy ending. But it's an honest story about the possibility of redemption, the importance of boundaries, and the complicated reality of family relationships. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. If you're facing similar challenges with family members who've betrayed your trust, know that you're not alone and that healing is possible, not necessarily reconciliation, but healing. You have the right to protect yourself from people who would harm you, even if they're family. You have the right to set boundaries and stick to them. You have the right to demand consistent changed behavior before offering trust, and you have the right to walk away entirely if that change never comes. Most importantly, you have the right to build a life that doesn't revolve around other people's needs and expectations. You are worth more than what you can provide to others, and your love should never come at the cost of your own destruction. Thank you for watching my story. I hope it brings you some comfort if you're facing your own family challenges, or some insight if you're trying to understand how families can survive betrayal and find their way back to each other. Please consider subscribing to this channel if you found my story helpful. there are many more stories from people who faced similar challenges and found their way through. And feel free to share your own experiences in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone is the first step toward healing. Until next time, remember that you are stronger than you know, more valuable than you've been told, and worthy of relationships that build you up rather than tear you down. Take care of yourselves, and thank you for being part of this community of people who believe in the possibility of second chances, both giving them and earning them.